John Harper's life was a patchwork of struggles stitched together by sheer determination. Every day felt like an uphill battle, but he never let himself give up. Not when there were two little faces waiting for him at home, eager to see their dad despite the weariness etched into his features. John wasn't just a father. He was a warrior fighting against circumstances that seemed determined to break him. His wife Sarah had been his rock, his partner in every sense of the word. But 3 years ago, cancer stole her away, leaving behind a void so vast it often felt suffocating. Yet through all the grief and hardship, John kept moving forward, for his kids. He worked long hours at the local factory, operating machines with precision, even when his mind wandered to thoughts of bills piling up or how thin his paycheck stretched each month. The job paid enough to keep food on the table, but not much more than that. To make ends meet, John picked up odd jobs on weekends, fixing leaky faucets, mowing lawns, painting fences, anything that could bring in a few extra dollars. His hands were calloused from years of hard labor, but they still managed to hold his children gently when tucking them into bed at night. Those moments were sacred to him, brief escapes from reality where laughter replaced worry, if only for a little while. Despite everything, John carried himself with quiet dignity. He believed in doing what was right, even when no one was watching. It wasn't about grand gestures or seeking recognition, it was simply who he was. On this particular autumn evening, as golden leaves swirled around him in the crisp air, John trudged wearily along the sidewalk after finishing another exhausting shift at his second job. His worn-out shoes scuffed against the pavement, and his shoulders sagged under the weight of both physical fatigue and emotional burdens. Still, he pressed on, knowing that his kids would be waiting for him, probably already wondering why dinner was late again. As he passed by the small neighborhood park, a place he sometimes took his own children to play, he noticed something unusual. A faint sound reached his ears, cutting through the rustling leaves and distant hum of traffic. At first he thought it might be the wind playing tricks on him, but then he heard it again, soft sobs, barely audible, yet unmistakably human. Curiosity turned to concern as he scanned the area, his eyes finally landing on a tiny figure huddled on one of the park benches. It was a little girl, no older than 8, sitting alone in the fading light of dusk. Her knees were drawn up to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around them as she rocked back and forth. She wore a bright pink coat that stood out starkly against the muted colors of the autumn landscape, but its cheerful hue did nothing to mask the sadness radiating from her small frame. Beside her lay a stuffed bunny, its fur matted and slightly dirty, clutched loosely in one hand. Tears streamed down her cheeks, catching the glow of the street lamp nearby. John hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to approach. He didn't know this child, and approaching strangers, especially children, always came with a certain level of caution. But something about the scene tugged at his heartstrings. Maybe it was the way she reminded him of his own daughter, Lily, with her curly hair and delicate features. Or maybe it was the instinctive need to protect someone who clearly needed help. Whatever it was, John couldn't walk away. Taking a deep breath, he stepped closer, his voice gentle as he called out, "Hey there, are you okay?" The girl startled at the sound of his voice, her wide eyes darting up to meet his. For a split second, fear flickered across her face, but it quickly softened when she saw the kindness in his expression. Sniffling, she wiped her nose with the sleeve of her coat and nodded weakly. I'm lost," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Lost?" John repeated, crouching down to her level so he wouldn't seem intimidating. "Do you remember your name? Can you tell me where you live?" She hesitated before speaking, clutching her bunny tighter. "My name is Emily," she said quietly. "I was with my mommy and daddy at the mall today, but I got separated from them. I tried to find them, but..." Her voice trailed off, fresh tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know where I am anymore." John's heart sank. He knew all too well how terrifying it must feel to be lost and alone, especially for a child. Memories of his own panic whenever his kids wandered off briefly surfaced, reminding him how easily things could spiral out of control. Without hesitation, he removed his jacket, the same one patched multiple times, and draped it over Emily's shoulders. "Don't worry, sweetheart," he said reassuringly. "We'll figure this out together. I promise." Emily looked up at him, her tear-streaked face lighting up with a glimmer of hope. "You'll help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," John replied firmly. "Let's start by getting you warm and fed, okay? Then we'll work on finding your parents." With that, he extended his hand, offering her a lifeline amidst her fear. After a moment's hesitation, Emily slipped her small fingers into his rough palm. Together, they began walking toward the nearest diner, the dim glow of its neon sign visible in the distance. As they moved side by side, John couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was somehow meant to happen. Little did he know, helping this lost girl would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. John and Emily walked hand in hand toward the diner, their footsteps crunching softly against the fallen leaves scattered across the sidewalk. The air was chilly, but John's old jacket provided some warmth for the shivering girl. Her small fingers clung tightly to his as though afraid he might disappear if she let go. Despite her fear, there was a flicker of trust in her eyes now, trust that John would keep his promise to help her find her way home. As they approached the diner, its warm yellow lights spilled onto the street, casting a comforting glow. The sign above the door read Maggie's Diner, its letters slightly faded but still inviting. Inside, the smell of fried food mingled with the faint aroma of coffee, creating an atmosphere that felt cozy despite the modest surroundings. A few patrons sat at booths chatting quietly or sipping steaming mugs, while the cook worked diligently behind the counter. It wasn't fancy, but it was exactly what Emily needed right now, shelter from the cold and something to calm her nerves. John guided her gently to a booth near the window and slid in beside her. "Let's get you something warm to eat," he said with a reassuring smile. He turned to the waitress, a middle-aged woman named Maggie who had owned the place for decades. She recognized John immediately. He was a regular customer, often stopping by for a quick meal after work. "What can I get you tonight, John?" Maggie asked, pen poised over her notepad. Then she noticed the young girl sitting next to him, her cheeks flushed from crying and her hair slightly disheveled. Maggie's expression softened. "Oh my goodness. Is everything all right?" John nodded quickly, trying to reassure her without alarming Emily further. "She's just lost, Maggie. We're going to help her find her parents, but first she needs something to eat and drink." Maggie didn't hesitate. "Of course. Don't worry about a thing." She glanced down at Emily, offering her a kind smile. "How about a hot chocolate and a grilled cheese sandwich? Does that sound good, sweetie?" Emily hesitated for a moment before nodding shyly. "Yes, please," she murmured, clutching her stuffed bunny closer to her chest. While they waited for the food, John tried to coax more information out of Emily. He knew finding her parents wouldn't be easy without some clues. Leaning forward slightly, he spoke softly, so as not to overwhelm. Do you remember where you were shopping today? Was it a big store or a mall?" Emily thought for a moment, her brow furrowing in concentration. It was a really big building with lots of stores inside. Mommy said we were going to buy new shoes for school." "That's helpful," John said encouragingly. "Do you remember anything else? Like the name of the store or maybe the area around it?" "I think—" Emily paused, biting her lip. "I think Daddy said something about being close to a park, and there were tall buildings nearby." John nodded thoughtfully. That narrowed it down somewhat, though many neighborhoods in the city had parks and tall buildings. Still, it was a start. "Okay, that's great. You're doing amazing. Emily, we'll figure this out together." Just then, Maggie returned with a steaming mug of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream and a plate of golden brown grilled cheese. Emily's eyes lit up at the sight of the food, and for the first time since John had found her, she looked genuinely happy. She took a cautious sip of the hot chocolate, her face breaking into a small smile. "Thank you," she whispered, looking up at both John and Maggie. "You're very welcome, sweetheart," Maggie replied warmly. "Take your time and eat as much as you need." As Emily nibbled on her sandwich, John couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. This simple meal, a grilled cheese and a cup of hot chocolate, wasn't extravagant by any means, But even this small act of kindness cost him money he barely had. His wallet was already thin, and tomorrow's expenses loomed, large in his mind. Yet watching Emily relax ever so slightly, he knew he'd made the right choice. There was no price tag on compassion, and helping someone in need was a responsibility he took seriously. Once Emily had finished eating, her energy seemed to return a little. She sat up straighter, her earlier tears replaced by a tentative curiosity. "Mr. John," she began hesitantly, "are you sure you can help me find my mommy and daddy?" John met her gaze steadily, his voice filled with conviction. "Absolutely, Emily, I won't stop until we find them. But I'll need your help too, okay? If you remember anything else, any names, streets, or landmarks, you tell me right away." Emily nodded earnestly. "I will. I promise." With renewed determination, John paid the bill, leaving a generous tip for Maggie, who had been so understanding, and helped Emily slide out of the booth. They stepped back into the cool night air, the streets quieter now as most people had retreated indoors. Armed with the vague details Emily had provided, John decided to start their search near the largest shopping district in the city, a sprawling complex surrounded by parks and skyscrapers. It matched Emily's description well enough to warrant a closer look. The walk to the shopping district was long, and Emily grew tired quickly. Her small legs struggled to keep pace with John's longer strides, and she stumbled more than once. Each time, John slowed down, giving her a chance to catch her breath. When she tripped over a crack in the sidewalk, scraping her knee, John knelt beside her immediately. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Emily winced but nodded bravely. "It's just a little scratch." John rummaged through his pocket and pulled out a crumpled tissue, using it to gently dab at the scrape. "Here, let me clean that up for you. We don't want it getting infected." Emily watched him silently, her lips pressed together in a tight line. Then, surprising even herself, she blurted out, "You're really nice, Mr. John. Most people wouldn't do all this for a stranger." Her words caught him off guard, and for a moment John didn't know how to respond. Finally, he smiled softly. "Well, sometimes strangers turn out to be friends when you least expect it. And besides, everyone deserves a little kindness, don't you think?" Emily nodded, her faith in humanity seemingly restored, at least for the moment. With her knee cleaned and her spirits lifted, they continued their journey. Along the way, John pointed out familiar landmarks, a towering statue in the park, a brightly lit gas station, a row of colorful storefronts, to jog Emily's memory. Slowly but surely, pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. When they finally reached the shopping district, Emily's eyes widened in recognition. "This is it!" she exclaimed excitedly. "This is where we were earlier." Relief washed over John, though he knew their work wasn't done yet. The shopping district was massive, with dozens of stores spread across multiple levels. Finding Emily's parents among the sea of shoppers would require patience and persistence. Still, they were closer than before, and that gave him hope. They wandered through the bustling corridors. John kept a protective hand on Emily's shoulder, ensuring she stayed close. He stopped occasionally to ask shopkeepers and security guards if anyone had reported a missing child. Each time, he described, Emily carefully hoping someone might have seen her earlier that day. Hours passed and exhaustion began to creep in. Emily's initial excitement waned, replaced by fatigue and uncertainty. John, too, felt the weight of the night pressing down on him. But just when it seemed like they'd hit a dead end, a commotion erupted near the entrance of the mall. A frantic couple rushed in, their faces pale with worry. They scanned the crowd desperately, calling out a name. "Emily!" the woman cried, her voice cracking with emotion. "Emily, where are you?" At the sound of her mother's voice, Emily froze. Her eyes widened, and tears sprang to them once again. But these were tears of joy. Breaking free from John's grasp, she ran toward the couple, her tiny legs carrying her as fast as they could. "Mommy, Daddy!" she shouted, throwing herself into their arms. The reunion was heartwarming, a scene that brought tears to the eyes of those who witnessed it. The couple hugged Emily fiercely, their relief palpable. When they finally looked up and saw John standing a few feet away, their gratitude knew no bounds. "Thank you," the father said, his voice choked with emotion. "We've been searching everywhere for her. How can we ever repay you?" John shook his head modestly. "There's no need. I'm just glad she's safe." But the couple insisted, vowing to show their appreciation in ways John couldn't have imagined. Little did he know, this act of kindness would ripple far beyond that single night, changing his life in ways he never dreamed possible. The reunion between Emily and her parents was nothing short of emotional. The couple hugged their daughter tightly, tears streaming down their faces as they whispered words of love and relief into her ears. Emily clung to them just as fiercely, her small body trembling with a mix of joy and exhaustion. For a few moments, the world seemed to shrink around them, narrowing down to this one sacred moment of connection. John stood quietly at a distance, watching the scene unfold with a lump in his throat. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that he had played a part in bringing this family back together. As the initial wave of emotions subsided, Emily's father turned to John, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I can't thank you enough," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We've been searching everywhere for her. How did you find her?" John shrugged modestly, trying to downplay his role. "She was sitting alone in the park when I came across her. She told me she got separated from you at the mall, so we started looking for your home. It wasn't much, just following the clues she gave me." Emily's mother stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly together as if she were afraid letting go would make her lose her daughter all over again. "You have no idea how worried we were," she said, her voice trembling. "When we realized she wasn't with us anymore, it felt like our whole world collapsed. We called the police, searched every corner of the mall, and even drove around the neighborhood. But nothing worked until now." She paused, wiping away fresh tears. "And then you showed up. You brought her back to us." John shifted uncomfortably under their praise. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not for something he considered simple human decency. "Anyone would have done the same thing," he replied humbly. "I'm just glad I could help." But Emily's parents weren't satisfied with leaving it at that. They exchanged a glance, silently communicating something between them before turning back to John. "No, not everyone would have done what you did," Emily's father said firmly. "Most people wouldn't take the time or risk their own comfort to help a stranger. What you did tonight, it means more to us than you'll ever know." Before John could respond, Emily tugged on her father's sleeve, pulling his attention toward her. "Daddy, Mr. John bought me hot chocolate and a sandwich when I was hungry," she said earnestly. "He also carried me when my legs got tired. He's really, really nice." Her innocent words only added to the weight of the couple's gratitude. Emily's mother reached out and placed a gentle hand on John's arm. "Please, let us repay you somehow. There must be something we can do to show how thankful we are." John hesitated, unsure how to respond. His instinct was to refuse. He had never sought rewards for doing what he believed was right, but he also didn't want to offend them. Finally, he shook his head gently. "There's no need," he said. "Really, I'm just happy Emily is safe. That's reward enough for me." The couple exchanged another meaningful look, and this time Emily's father nodded decisively. "Well, whether you accept it or not, we owe you more than words can express. Please at least tell us your name so we can remember you forever." "My name's John Harper," he replied simply. "And like I said, I'm just glad everything worked out." With that, the conversation seemed to wind down, though the atmosphere remained charged with emotion. Emily's parents thanked him repeatedly, promising they'd never forget his kindness. As they prepared to leave, Emily ran back to John one last time, throwing her arms around his waist in an unexpected hug. "Thank you, Mr. John," she whispered, her voice muffled against his jacket. "You're my hero." John chuckled softly, patting her head awkwardly. "Take care of yourself, okay? And listen to your parents. They love you very much." With that final exchange, the family walked away, disappearing into the night. John watched them go, feeling a strange mixture of contentment and emptiness. Helping Emily had given him a sense of purpose, but now that it was over, reality began creeping back in. He was still a struggling single father with bills to pay and mouths to feed. Yet, there was something different about him now. A renewed sense of hope, perhaps, or the quiet knowledge that even in the darkest times acts of kindness could light the way. The next morning, John woke up early as usual, ready to tackle another long day of work. The events of the previous night felt almost surreal, like a dream that faded quickly upon waking. Still, the memory of Emily's smile lingered in his mind, a reminder that goodness existed in the world, even if it sometimes hid behind layers of hardship. As he sipped his morning coffee and glanced out the window, he noticed something unusual. A sleek black luxury car parked outside his modest home. At first he thought it might belong to one of his neighbors, but curiosity got the better of him. Stepping outside, he saw two figures approaching his front door. One was Emily's father, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, while the other was a man carrying a leather briefcase who introduced himself as a lawyer. "Good morning, Mr. Harper," Emily's father said warmly, extending his hand. "I hope we're not disturbing you." John shook his hand, confusion evident on his face. "Not at all, but what brings you here?" Emily's father smiled, though there was seriousness in his tone. "We wanted to talk to you about something important. May we come in?" Moments later, they were seated in John's living room, which was modestly furnished but clean and welcoming. The lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents, laying them carefully on the coffee table. Emily's father leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Mr. Harper, what you did for our family last night was extraordinary. We've spent hours discussing how we can properly express our gratitude, and we've decided on something that we believe will make a real difference in your life." John frowned, shaking his head slightly. "You don't need to do anything for me. I told you I was just doing what anyone else would have done." "That may be true," Emily's father replied, "but not everyone does it. And because of you, our daughter is safe, so please hear us out." The lawyer handed John a document explaining its contents. It was a check, a substantial one, that would cover all of John's outstanding debts, including medical bills left over from his late wife's treatment. Another portion of the funds was earmarked specifically for his children's education, ensuring they'd have opportunities he had always dreamed of giving them. Finally, there was enough left over to provide financial stability for years to come. John stared at the check, his heart pounding. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. This is too much," he stammered. "I can't accept this." "You can," Emily's father insisted, "and you will. Think of it as an investment in kindness, a way of paying forward the incredible gift you gave us last night." Before John could protest further, the lawyer explained additional details. Along with the financial support, the luxury car parked outside was now officially his. "It's fully paid for," the lawyer clarified. "Consider it a token of our appreciation. You deserve it, Mr. Harper." Tears welled up in John's eyes as he struggled to process everything. For years he had carried the weight of responsibility alone, scraping by and sacrificing endlessly for his family. Now, in the blink of an eye, that burden had been lifted. He looked at Emily's father, his voice choked with emotion. "I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't feel like enough." "You don't need to say anything," Emily's father replied kindly. "Just keep being the amazing person you are. That's all the thanks we need." After they left, John sat alone in his living room, staring at the check and marveling at how quickly life could change. The luxury car gleamed in the sunlight. Outside, a symbol not just of generosity but of hope. For the first time in years, John allowed himself to imagine a brighter future, not just for himself, but for his children too. And deep down he knew this wasn't just about him. It was about the power of kindness, proving that even the smallest act could spark a chain reaction of good fortune. The days following the unexpected visit from Emily's parents felt surreal for John Harper. It was as though he had stepped into an alternate reality, one where the constant weight of financial struggles no longer hung over him like a storm cloud. The check they had given him wasn't just money. It was freedom. Freedom to breathe, to dream, and most importantly, to provide for his children in ways he had only imagined before. Yet despite the overwhelming gratitude swelling in his chest, John found himself grappling with a mix of emotions: joy, disbelief, and even guilt. He spent hours sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the documents spread out before him. Each line item on the check represented something tangible: a debt erased, a future secured, or a new opportunity waiting to be seized. But it also came with questions that lingered in his mind. Was this too good to be true? Did he deserve such generosity? And what would people think if they knew about it? These thoughts swirled around endlessly until he finally decided to focus on what mattered most: using this gift wisely to create a better life for his family. First, John tackled the immediate burdens that had weighed him down for years. He paid off every last bill: credit cards, hospital expenses from his wife's illness, loans taken out during desperate times, all wiped clean in one fell swoop. For the first time in ages, he opened his mailbox without dread, knowing there wouldn't be another envelope filled with red ink demanding payment. That alone felt like shedding chains he hadn't realized were so heavy. Next, he turned his attention to their modest home. While it had always been a place of love and warmth, it was also showing its age. Leaky faucets, peeling paint, and drafty windows had become part of daily life, simply because fixing them hadn't been an option. Now, armed with the means to do so, John hired contractors to make much-needed repairs. Fresh coats of paint brightened the walls. New insulation kept the cold air out, and sturdy locks ensured the house felt safer than ever. When his kids, Lily and Jake, walked through the door after school one afternoon to find their home transformed, their faces lit up with excitement. "Dad, did you win the lottery or something?" Lily asked, her eyes wide as she ran her fingers along the freshly painted walls. John chuckled, ruffling her hair affectionately. "Not exactly, kiddo. Let's just say someone very kind helped us out." While the physical changes to their home brought visible joy, the emotional impact ran even deeper. With financial worries lifted, John could finally devote more time to being present for his children. Instead of rushing off to another job or stressing over unpaid bills, he joined them for bedtime stories, helped Jake practice math problems, and taught Lily how to bake cookies from scratch. Those small moments became treasures, filling gaps left by years of scarcity. But John didn't stop there. Remembering the countless nights he had spent working long hours at the factory, repairing machines and troubleshooting technical issues, he began thinking about starting something of his own. Why not take all that experience and channel it into a business? It was risky, sure, but for once he had the resources to try. After careful consideration, he decided to open a repair shop specializing in household appliances, a service he knew was sorely needed in their community. With the help of a local contractor, John renovated an old storefront downtown, transforming it into a cozy yet functional space. He named it Harper Repairs, adding a simple tagline beneath the sign, "Fixing what matters." Inside, shelves lined the walls, stocked with tools and spare parts, while a workbench stood ready for action. To save costs, John handled most of the setup himself, enlisting his kids' help during weekends. Together they cleaned, organized, and decorated the shop, turning it into a place they could all take pride in. Word spread quickly about the struggling father who had once helped a lost girl find her way home, and whose life had changed forever because of it. Neighbors remembered John from his factory days and admired his resilience. When Harper Repairs officially opened its doors, customers flocked in, eager to support him. Some brought broken toasters, others hauled in malfunctioning washing machines, and a few simply stopped by to shake his hand and share words of encouragement. What set John apart wasn't just his skill, it was his attitude. He treated each customer with genuine care, listening patiently to their concerns and explaining repairs in terms anyone could understand. If someone couldn't afford his services, he offered discounts or payment plans, refusing to turn anyone away. Over time, Harper Repairs became more than just a business. It became a cornerstone of the community, a place where people knew they'd be treated fairly and respectfully. As months passed, John noticed something remarkable happening. His story inspired others to act with kindness too. A young mother, struggling to pay rent, mentioned how John's generosity reminded her to volunteer at the local food bank. An elderly man who had received free repairs for his wheelchair began offering free gardening lessons to neighborhood kids. Even strangers passing through town heard whispers of John's journey and left donations to help keep his shop running smoothly. One day, as John worked on fixing a stubborn refrigerator compressor, a familiar face appeared in the doorway. It was Emily's father, accompanied by his wife and, of course, little Emily herself. They had driven over to see how John was doing and to personally thank him again. Seeing them walk in, John set down his tools and greeted them warmly. "We just wanted to check in," Emily's father said, smiling broadly. "How's everything going?" "It's going great," John replied honestly. "Better than I ever imagined. You've given me a chance to build something meaningful, not just for my family but for everyone here." Emily stepped forward, clutching her stuffed bunny tightly. She looked older now, taller, but her eyes still sparkled with the same innocence John remembered from that fateful night. "I told my friends about you, Mr. John," she said proudly. "They said you're a hero." John laughed softly, crouching, down to her level. "And I told you, you're the real hero, Emily. Without you, none of this would have happened." Her parents exchanged a knowing glance, clearly moved by John's humility. Before leaving, Emily's father handed John a small envelope. Inside was an invitation to a charity gala hosted by their company, an event aimed at raising funds for families facing hardships similar to those John had endured. "We'd be honored if you joined us," he said sincerely. "Your story deserves to be shared." Though nervous about attending such a formal gathering, John accepted the invitation. He realized that sharing his experience might inspire others to believe in the power of kindness, just as he had come to believe in it himself. By the end of the year, Harper Repairs was thriving, and John's reputation as a compassionate and hardworking man continued to grow. People often remarked on how far he had come since those difficult days, when every decision felt like choosing between two impossible options. But John knew better. This wasn't just his success, it belonged to everyone who had shown him kindness along the way, and deep down he vowed never to forget that. Little did he know, however, that his journey was far from over. The ripple effects of his actions were spreading farther than he could imagine, touching lives beyond his immediate circle, and planting seeds of hope in places he had yet to discover. Years had passed since that fateful autumn evening when John Harper found Emily sitting alone on a park bench. What began as a simple act of kindness, a decision to help a frightened child, had blossomed into something far greater than he ever could have imagined. His life, once defined by struggle and sacrifice, was now filled with purpose, stability, and opportunities he had once only dreamed of. Yet the most profound change wasn't in his circumstances, it was in his heart. Helping Emily had awakened something deep within him, a belief in the power of compassion and its ability to create ripples of good that extended far beyond what anyone could see. John's repair shop, Harper Repairs, had become more than just a business. It was a cornerstone of the community. People didn't just come for his expertise, they came because they trusted him. Word of mouth had spread stories about the man who fixed appliances but also helped people fix their lives, even if only in small ways. Whether it was offering payment plans to struggling families or teaching teenagers how to use tools so they could learn a trade, John made sure his work went beyond profit. He often said, "Every problem has a solution, whether it's a broken fridge or a tough situation. Sometimes all someone needs is someone willing to try." His generosity inspired others to follow suit. The ripple effect of his actions became evident as neighbors began looking out for one another in new ways. A young mother started a free babysitting co-op after seeing how John balanced work and family. An elderly couple began hosting weekly dinners for seniors living alone, inspired by the warmth John brought to their interactions at the shop. Even strangers passing through town would leave donations or kind notes taped to the shop's door, thanking him for reminding them that goodness still existed in the world. One crisp spring morning, as John was organizing shelves inside the shop, A familiar sound caught his attention, the soft hum of a luxury car engine pulling up outside. He glanced out the window and smiled knowingly. Sure enough, there was Emily's father stepping out of the sleek black vehicle, dressed sharply in a tailored suit. This time, however, he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Emily, now a teenager, taller and more confident, yet still carrying her beloved stuffed bunny. She waved enthusiastically when she spotted John watching from the doorway. "Mr. John," she called out, running toward him with the same energy she'd shown years ago. "We've missed you." John laughed, opening his arms wide as she hugged him tightly. "Look at you. You've grown so much," he said, marveling at how quickly time had flown. Turning to Emily's father, he added, "And look at this fancy car again. Are you trying to show off?" Emily's father chuckled, shaking his head. "Not showing off, just making sure we don't forget where we came from, and reminding ourselves of the incredible person who changed our lives." After exchanging pleasantries, Emily's father explained the reason for their visit. They wanted to update John on how his story had continued to inspire others. Through the charity gala he had attended years earlier, his tale of selflessness had reached audiences far beyond their hometown. Local newspapers wrote articles, schools invited him to speak, and non-profit organizations sought his advice on fostering community spirit. People were moved not just by what he had done for Emily, but by how he had chosen to use the blessings he received to uplift others. "We're here today because your story keeps spreading," Emily's father said, earnestly. "It's touched so many lives, including ours, and we want to make sure you know that. You've created a legacy of kindness." John listened quietly, his chest swelling with emotion. Legacy wasn't a word he associated with himself. To him, he was just a regular guy doing what felt right. But hearing those words reminded him of something important. Even the smallest acts of kindness could grow into something extraordinary when nurtured by intention and love. As the day wore on, Emily surprised John with a gift. A scrapbook filled with photos, letters, and newspaper clippings documenting the impact of his journey. There were pictures of him fixing appliances alongside grateful customers, notes from families whose burdens he had eased, and testimonials from people who credited him with restoring their faith in humanity. Flipping through the pages, John felt tears welling up in his eyes. Each entry was a reminder of how interconnected life truly was, how one action could spark countless others. That evening, as John sat alone in his living room reflecting on everything that had happened, he thought about the future. His children, Lily and Jake, were thriving, Lily excelling in school and Jake discovering a passion for engineering thanks to the skills he'd learned helping at the shop. Their laughter filled the house, a constant reminder of why John had fought so hard to give them a better life. But he also thought about the broader community, wondering how he could continue paying forward the blessings he'd received. The answer came to him in the form of an idea, an initiative he called Repairing Lives. It would be a program designed to teach trades like carpentry, plumbing, and appliance repair to underprivileged youth, giving them skills to build brighter futures. Partnering with local schools and nonprofits, John envisioned creating a space where young people could learn, grow, and contribute to their communities. He knew firsthand how empowering it felt to take control of one's destiny, and he wanted to share that feeling with others. When John announced the initiative at a town meeting, the response was overwhelming. Volunteers signed up to mentor students, businesses donated tools and materials, and parents expressed gratitude for providing their kids with opportunities they couldn't afford elsewhere. Within months, Repairing Lives was up and running, transforming not just individual lives but the entire community. Years later, as John stood watching a group of teenagers proudly present the projects they had built during the program's first graduation ceremony, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. These young men and women weren't just learning trades, they were learning values, perseverance, teamwork, and the importance of giving back. And while John remained humble about his role, he couldn't deny the truth. His simple act of kindness had ignited a chain reaction of goodwill that showed no signs of stopping. As the sun set over the town, casting golden light across the faces of those gathered, John reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He thought about Emily, her parents, and the countless individuals whose paths had crossed his along the way. Each encounter had taught him something valuable, that no matter how difficult life might seem, there was always room for hope, for connection, and for kindness. In the end, John realized that true wealth wasn't measured in money or possessions. It was measured in the lives we touched and the positive changes we inspired in others. And though he had started as a struggling father simply trying to make ends meet, he had become so much more, a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience, and a testament to the enduring power of compassion.